Alejandro Toledo is indeed a man of vision, and he did not come to it easily. He's been a fighter against poverty and injustice and for freedom, human rights, and equal opportunity throughout his improbable life. I think most of you know that he rose from very humble circumstances to lead a courageous campaign against authoritarian rule. He was elected president of Peru in 2001 and served until July 2006. He was the first Peruvian president of indigenous descent to be democratically elected in 500 years. And during his term in office, he worked to achieve in practice what he has studied, written about, and advocated before and since being president of Peru, which is, to use his words, a democracy that delivers, especially for the poor and marginalized. I think you know his history of growing up in a remote village in the Peruvian Andes as one of 16 brothers and sisters, working as a shoe shiner, selling newspapers and lotteries to supplement the family income. He's fond of saying that his life is a statistical accident, and in that sense, I guess it is. He then went on to, as you know, get his undergraduate degree from University of San Francisco and his PhD in the economics of human resources from the School of Education here. During his 5 years as president, the Peruvian economy grew extraordinarily, given its history, at an average rate of 6%. Inflation averaged 1.5%. The fiscal deficit, which had been serious, went as low as 0.2%. And as a result of sustained economic growth, and this is all about how you merge growth with distribution, and priority investments in health and education directed especially to the poorest Peruvians, extreme poverty was reduced by 25% in 5 years. So he not only has a vision, he has a record. Under his leadership, Peru became one of the early Latin American countries to institute a conditional cash transfer program to aid the poor, especially poor women and poor children. Dr. Toledo has used his post-presidency with energy and imagination to continue to address the problems of his country and the Americas, and to organize his fellow former presidents in a community to address these issues. We are deeply grateful to have hosted him at CDDRL during 2 years while he was working on this book in 2012 to 2014, and to also have had at Stanford University a visiting scholar, the former First Lady of Peru, his wife, the noted anthropologist Dr. Eliane Karp, who also produced her own book during these 2 years. So what an extraordinary period it was for Stanford University to have these two extraordinary individuals here. And I would now like to invite Dr. Alejandro Toledo to come up and present his book, The Shared Society, after which we will have a conversation. People will be able to ask questions, and then he will be happy to sign your book in the lobby. Alejandro?
First of all, from the bottom of my heart, I want to express my gratitude first to Stanford University, who has shaped me to be a stubborn fighter against poverty, inequality, and strength democracy in Latin America and in the world. Maybe stubborn is not the word. Academically, kosher might be persistent. Secondly, I want to thank my friend Larry Diamond, the director of the Center for Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law. He has been an incredible inspiration, supporter, and a friend. I want to thank my colleagues at the center, as well as at the Freedom and Spokane Institute, who have helped me, who I benefited from their wisdom. To Frank Fukuyama, who read several of the versions of the book. To my research assistants who work with me in trying to polish my rusty English and accumulate the numbers. I want to express my special gratitude to one person who took the risk of this error margin in the world of probabilities to take me on in 1970 when I was accepted at 6 prestigious universities, except one who said no, and took the risk. I was accepted at another university, but I didn't have the money to pay for it. This is a very irreverent, deliberately provocative book. Maybe it's not academically so kosher, but it's purposely done. Part of the irreverence had to do with a professor that has been my teacher, my thesis advisor, my Irish papa, and who has been collaborator of mine when I was a president. And now continues to give me his advice. Someone who never takes a prisoner. I'm referring to Professor Martin Carnoy from the School of Education, an economist. And I want to thank you very, very much. Larry, thank you.
Thank you.
My friends, academicians are very sophisticated, particularly economists, and using sophisticated econometric models to forecast the past. And we, and I'm referring to myself, not to involve anyone, have decided to take the risk to think about the future. To think about the kind of world and life profile that our children and the children of our children will have the next 35 years when we reach 2050. And the world will be 9 billion people. It's a dream. It's an illusion. It's an idealistic. Yes, what the hell? Let me begin by the basic premise of the book. The basic premise is that I'm cautiously optimistic. And I assert with emphasis that Latin America is the promising continent in the world in the next 35 years. I repeat, I'm cautiously optimistic. And Latin America will be, by the year 2050, the promising continent of the world. However, it is not free of an enormous, tremendous challenges that we need to meet. And to meet those challenges, we need the courage and the inspirational leadership to make decisions now in order to shape a livable future for the children's and the children's of our children. I don't have the data of 2035. I just have the vision, at least my opinion. But I need to substantiate why I think Latin America is the promising continent of the world. Provided that we have the strength, the courage, the leadership, the vision to make decisions today, knowing that it's not politically profitable in the short term, knowing that the rate of return in political popularity will not be in the short run, but rather we think it in the medium and long term. This is not about politics, thinking in the next election. This is a vision or a creationist thinking about the next generations. Never before Latin America had had the unique opportunity. Let me begin by sharing with you what are the strengths of the region that leads me to believe and to hold this cautiously optimistic about the region. Number one, the world by 2050 will not have wars over oil or gas, because technological development, particularly around Stanford, have shown that now we can produce a car with the energy of solar panels. I have driven one. I've driven a car without a driver. And it's 100% safer than driven by a human being. I drove a car with the energy of solar panels. So those who provoke the wars today, based on the fact that they have a lot of oil, by the 2050, within my perception, they will have to drink their oil. The world will confront all the challenges. The dispute will be over the scarcity of clean drinking water, food security, to confront the adverse effects of climate change. If we don't have the courage to make decisions today, thinking in the life profile of our children. I hope that we, in the next 35 years, our leadership will emerge with the courage to make decisions about those new challenges. What are those challenges in addition to drinking water, food security, confronting the adverse impact of climate change? We need to have a sustained rates of economic growth with a diverse composition of growth that is not based on the export of raw material. Because today, 15 years of economic growth in the region has still been based 65% of foreign exchange is derived from the export of gold, silver, copper, oil, fish meal, which is make us very vulnerable as a region. We are dependent of an exogenous factors that we do not control. China has been growing in the last 15 years at 10%, but it has dropped at 7.5% now. So they are buying less products from the region, and the prices are dropping. So the other challenge is to diversify the composition of economic growth, to reorient into other productive sectors such as agroindustry, which is labor intensive, and help us to confront the food supply. Micro-entrepreneurship, ecotourism, science, technology, innovation are the other sectors in which we need to diversify in order to leave from that vulnerability of the fluctuations of the prices of commodities in the international market. We need sustained economic growth with a diversified composition of it. I know that that's not a short-term issue. And therefore, I'm not suggesting that we should stop stimulating investment in extractive industry, because we need the money to make the shift and to meet the other challenges that I'm going to mention to you a little bit later. No, we're not against investment in extractive industry. I don't know whether it was a gift or a punishment that God gave the region by putting too many natural resources. But if it was a punishment, we can convert it into an opportunity. Let's get the foreign exchange in order to have money to invest in the minds of our people. But let's begin not only to depend on the export of raw material. I'm not against extractive industry, provided that we have a small but a strong government that establishes clear rules of the game, that, yes, provides social, political, economic stability, but we need to demand that the extractive industry comply with the social, environmental responsibilities. And we need for them to share part of the gains with the rural community where the extractive industry is based. And that depends a lot from the government. To comply with the social environmental responsibility as we begin the diversification in order not to depend only on raw material. Latin America has another strength. We have 37% of the clean water in the world. Latin America is the region, Latin America is the region that has the greatest biodiversity in the world. Latin America has an incredible cultural diversity that is our strength, not our weakness. We have 15 different microclimates. We can produce products all the year round, and sometimes twice a year. Latin America, Peru, is the world's largest producers of green asparagus. Peru is the largest producers of avocado in the world. The region has the potential to build a model of human capital. 60 billion people in Latin America, a little bit bigger than the European Union. 24 million of them are Latin Americans who have bachelor degrees, master degrees, or PhDs. They are in a diaspora in the world. If we have the leadership and the courage, we will not only invest in a good quality of education, but we can save time simultaneously by recuperating that stock of human capital that is in a diaspora in the world, providing a stimulation not only in terms of income, but also the satisfaction to make a difference in our respective countries. Some of the strengths. The challenges? Not only to diversify the composition of growth, we need to make decisions today, thinking in the next 35 years. Fundamentally, investing in three very interrelated factors that play a crucial role in any development process in the world, and the empirical evidence are strong. I want to kill early malnutrition, which is associated with the need to provide quality of health and quality of education. Quality of education. I want to create scientific cities in each state of our respective countries. I want to attract that stock of human capital that is in a diaspora in the world. And today, with technology, they don't have to leave their comfortable life in Europe and Japan or the United States. They can go back and forth and contribute to the development of their respective countries by going 2 months a year to their countries. The interrelationship between eliminating early malnutrition, providing health care and educational quality, combined with stimulated investment in science, technology, and innovation are crucial. I know that this does not provide short-term political returns for thinking in the next election. Might not see it, the results, because if you take a child from the rural areas who is malnourished, which is 5 years old, by the time he gets to be a professional, a medical doctor, an engineer, it will be 25 years, 30 years. But yet, we have the moral responsibility to make the decisions now. Now. This is not a theoretical proposition from a non-kosher academician. This is the story of my life. I wouldn't have been here. I wouldn't have had the privilege to be in front of you had it not be this factor of being part of an error margin in a world of probabilities. Yes, I'm the result of a statistical error. But the poor in the world will not wait to be an error margin. They deserve the right to have a quality of education. Because the interrelationship between strong, solid human capital that leads to sustained economic growth, helped by natural resources in the short term, could provide a democracy that delivers concrete and measurable results. A democracy that delivers. A democracy that is not based only on the election, but a democracy that provides leaders that govern democratically. It's not sufficient to use the democracy to be elected and maybe manipulate the process of election. It is indispensable to govern democratically. This synergy, because I believe strongly on the impact of education, and because I believe that democracy, with all its imperfections, makes people free, I am today in front of you to say my vision, my craziness, thanks to education. But the people who are caught in the cruelty of extreme poverty or inequality cannot wait for a statistical error. They deserve the right to learn how to fish. Don't give them fish away. Provide them the right to learn how to fish. And that will make a difference. This synergy between human capital, sustained, diversified economic growth, income from natural resources in order to invest in better salaries and a better training of teachers, to invest in science, technology, and innovation, provides a democracy that delivers. A democracy that respects the freedom of the press. Of course, a press that don't sell their writing. Respect for human rights and independence of the institutions. This energy. My friends, The book is irrelevant. It is not very kosher, but it thinks on the future. It's one vision. We might disagree with it. That's fine. If we cannot contrast different opinions in the academic world, then we stop learning. I have a PowerPoint of 65 slides, and it will take me an hour and a half to do that. But Larry, I'm going to leave the PowerPoint, and I'm going to leave the book so they can have access to that. And I preferred to dedicate my time to transmit the message rather than going through the numbers that I would like to indulge myself. All these challenges demands one crucial component. They need a new profile of leadership in Latin America and in the world. The things or dreams with a vision, thinking in the next generation. It demands an inspired, courageous decision. Decisions that need to be made today, knowing that you won't benefit from the results. With all due respect, part of the irreverence of the book is saying that the world that is a multipolar world has a severe crisis of world leadership. There's a crisis of world leadership. Let me give you one single example. Climate change. We have met in Tokyo, the Tokyo Protocol, the leaders of the world. Nothing happened. We met there with the intentions of making concrete decisions about the adverse impacts of climate change. We met again in Copenhagen, and nothing happened. We met recently in Peru, the whole world, about climate change, and nothing happened. We will meet in Paris soon, and I hope that with the leadership of the United States and the European Union, we'll take the lead and tell China that it cannot hide itself by saying that they are a developing country when it's one of the countries that is most contaminated in the world. I have the responsibility of thinking about one of the few left lands of the world to breathe, the Amazon. Larry was there. I'm not ready to give in for people to contaminate the water, the 37% of the world clean water of the Amazon River. We need a leadership, and I said it with the most pleading intention. We have to make decisions that takes the courage of forgetting about the next election. Our children will never forgive us if we don't have that courage of making decisions now that affect the life quality 35 years from now. I said with all modesty, because in this center at FSI, there's a lot of people who are thinking about these issues: food security, water, climate change. How do we do to make a step forward of going from a sophisticated analysis to a policy decision that shapes the life profile of the future generations? Maybe also in this sense, I'm a non-kosher academician that combines academics with policy decision. I'm a rebellion. Yes. Some people said, he's a dreamer, idealistic, naive. Yeah. I'm all of that. But I will never stop. In the name of the people of the Freedom and Spokane Institute, of the Center for Democracy Development and the Rule of Law, in the name of Stanford University, who has shaped my life and who has helped me to have the privilege to conduct the destiny of my country for 5 years, I have made the promises that whatever time God gives me, I'm going to dedicate it to this dream, to this vision. From the bottom of my heart, thank you very much.
So let's come up here now. My mic is on now. Can you hear me? Good. So I'm going to dispense with the conversation between you and me since we got a late start. You've all been waiting very patiently. Some of you are friends of President Toledo. Others of you are admirers. Some of you are just my colleagues. But in any case, I want to give you a chance. So does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask or a comment they'd like to make? While you're thinking, I will ask the first question, and that is and here's the second mic. You've been very thoughtful to leave some time for Q&A, but I know an important element of your book and of your work over the last 10 years in drawing together the community of former freely elected presidents of Latin America and prime ministers that you have has involved the relationship, which you've implied in your slides, between delivering the shared society and not just democracy, but the quality of democracy and the quality of governance. You mentioned independent institutions. So can you explain what you meant by that and how the quality of governance feeds into the vision you have of democracy creating a shared society?
Thank you very much for the question, Larry. It's a very important one. And also, I decided not to go through the whole smear of slides because I will get indulged in the numbers and might lose the time for interacting. Yes, Larry, one of the crucial components of a quality of education, of democracy, is the challenge of building an architecture of strong democratic institutions that are accountable to the citizens. Where the administration of justice, you don't buy it. Where administration of justice gets also to the poor, even if they don't have money or don't have influence. Strong democratic institutions to prevent corruption, to stimulate the needed leadership that goes beyond the short term, because people are becoming disappointed. with politicians. So yes, your question is very pertinent, and I didn't emphasize it enough. One of the challenges is to build an architecture of strong democratic institutions together with a strong stock of human capital that we are losing outside the region. Having said this, I'm going to take the opportunity of your question to say that I would love for the leaders of the United States, with whom have really a very natural partnership, including the United States and Canada, with Latin America, I would encourage to take a look to the South. I know that you have your hands full with the issues of China, North Korea, Afghanistan, Russia, Iran. But God, we can have an enormous complementarity by sharing our strength and our weakness. We can share what we have done well and what we fail. Take a look a little bit to the South for a while. And let's sit in a level table as equals. Don't tell me what to do. Share your strength with us, that we will do the same with you. This is not any implications to any particular government. I'm talking about the vision of the hemisphere.
And a long history.
We share a long history, and we share a common challenges: narco-trafficking, organized crime. If we can share the technology that you have over here at Stanford or Silicon Valley, we can share some of the richness of the Inca culture. I'm proud of my roots. And I'm proud of the path that I walked to get here and to become a president. Let's not underestimate the richness of the cultural diversity of our continent. That will lead us to a shared society. Inclusion. No matter what the color of your skin is, no matter where you were born, whether you're a man or a woman, we have equal rights. So democratic institutions is a crucial role, Larry.
Okay, so now we'll go to you, that your questions are at the top of your mind. Why don't you stand up, and if you want, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, Mr. President. Thank you for your talk. I'd like to ask you 2 questions, if time permits. I'm Venezuelan, so I would like to sort of hone in on Venezuela, if you wouldn't mind. And you just talked about strong democratic structures and architectures that are accountable to their citizens. And I was wondering what your views are on the current crisis that Venezuela is undergoing. And then secondly, I'm very curious to know how your relationship with the late Hugo Chavez was during your tenure. So those are my questions.
They weren't the closest of friends.
I know that you are deliberately provoking me. I said to build strong democratic institutions, and that it's not sufficient to be elected using democracy. It is indispensable to govern democratically. What I forgot to say is that in the region, which is not a homogeneous one, there are some outliers countries with respect to democracy. And I like to go, as someone says, tachlis. Hugo Chavez and Mr. Inmaduro are the ones who sponsored the path of giving fish away because they have an income based on the abundance of oil when the prices of oil were high. Instead of giving their people the right to learn how to fish. It's not only Hugo Chavez. I know you're Venezuelan. But Nicaragua, Bolivia, Ecuador, and I'm sad to say, with all due respect, I'm concerned about what's happening in Argentina. But that's part of the challenge, and that's the question. The first question of Larry was very pertinent. We need to build strong democratic institutions that are accountable. And democracy means respect to the freedom of the press, respect the rights of every individual to have a different point of view. And having a different point of view is not a reason to be put in prison. You ask me what my relationship with the former Hugo Chavez? Let me be diplomatic. He was not my cup of tea. That is not only him, and I'm enrolled in the fight to help Venezuela and to the other countries, because there were some countries in Europe and Latin America who helped me when we led a democratic coalition. I put my life on risk, 17 death threats, and yet there were some head of states who received me as a rebel in the streets, helped me to bring down a dictatorship, corrupt dictatorship who was not Peruvian. And I don't know how it's in Venezuela, but in Peru, to be a president, you need to be born in Peru. So you know what? That's what I think. I think you know what I think about Venezuela. So your question was very healthy, provocative.
Great. Yes. Why don't you stand up?
Yes. Well, I work with the government in Peru with President Toledo in communications. And let me tell you that you are very fortunate today, because it's wonderful to hear him not as a president, because he is now telling everything he thinks. It's very difficult to be like he is today when you are a president. And because I believe that the human being needs to be a little utopian. And that's with the entrance to my question. The problem is that Latin America have never been so divided and so compressed by the corruption today. And I know, as many people here, Chavez and Maduro was are the worst that could happen to Venezuela, but they are the product. Chavez, the other side of the coin of Bush, and the response to the corruption of the former governments. So the problem is dynamic. How could you manage to get that unity? Because we all want to realize that utopia.
If we really have a new profile of leadership that thinks beyond the short run, the common challenges should unify us. The common challenges looking at the future could bring us together. If the United States takes a look a little bit to the south, we can really have a synergy. I'm cautiously optimistic about the profile of life of our children, provided that we have a new profile of leadership that have, as I said before, the courage and the inspired intelligence to make decisions now. Crucial decisions now, knowing that you will not benefit politically from those decisions. So I'm not as pessimistic as you sound, and I do understand that there's a lot of polarization, there is a lot of discredit of politicians. Congress in the world is very discredited. It is in our country. It is in Latin America. And that's what I mean by changing the profile of leadership. And it is not a sin to be an academician and be a politician, but a leader with a vision. I never had any experience in politics before. So I paid a very high price in my government. You know it. And dictators, what they do is they kidnap all the institutions. The judicial system, the Congress, the electoral board, the communication media, the church. And so they use democracy. You don't have a military coup any longer with the militaries, but they use democracy to get elected with money and then kidnap all the institutions for the re-elections. And people want to be presidents for life. No way. And it depends from us. So forgive me, I'm a little more optimistic than you.
That's good. We like that. It's not. You're going to be next. It's not a sin to be an academician and a politician. But I will tell you, if you had only been an academician, you would have shown all 65 slides. So it's good that you're not only that. Go ahead.
Hi. First of all, thank you for coming. I'm actually a Peruvian who's studying right now in Stanford in the MBA. I had a question for you, more as a previous candidate. You mentioned a lot of poverty reduction structural reforms, which, as you say, are not popular today because they manifest themselves 15 or 20 years in the future. But unfortunately, I mean, me being an economist, I understand this, but 80% of the people who vote in Peru don't. So how can, I mean, as being a past and prospective candidate, how can any candidate get elected tactically, thinking about this without selling to the people that you're going to have some populist measures, because that's what people see, the fish today. They don't care, they don't want to learn how to fish. They just want to eat today, tomorrow, and the next month.
Actually, that may not be such a theoretical question. But anyway, go ahead.
It's more a political question, and I'm not in the audience to do that, but I will not sell my soul to do a populist proposition. Besides, my friend, you're Peruvian, I already had the privilege to be a president. So if I'm through this craziness of pretending we haven't made any decision yet, but we are exploring and we return home, I could stay in the world with my wife, who is an incredible, courageous woman. This is my first PhD, by the way, at Stanford. To share the determination to give our lives to redraw the social face of Peru. A point. we cannot fall on the populist position of redistributing poverty. We need economic growth. I said a diversified composition of economic growth, but for me, economic growth is a mean, not an end. I don't believe in trickle-down theory. I believe in sustained rates of economic growth with an economy who is diversified. But what's important is the distribution of the benefits of economic growth. My bias, you can guess. I want to begin providing the right to learn how to fish through the elimination of malnutrition, providing quality of health care and quality of education, beginning with the poorest of the poor, with a delivered social policy, infrastructure for the people who do subsistence agriculture to get the products to the market. I have a point to make that I didn't mention, and that is the state capacity to deliver concrete and measurable results. And that's why we need the stock of human capital. And I ask you, please go back to Peru. I've been over here almost 40 years, back and forth. And at my age, I decided to go back. You are young. You can take the risk. Please, take a flight with me. Another question.
Okay, you're next in the cream color, the woman there, and then I'm going to come to you next, okay? Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I'm from Colombia, and I wanted to ask you about how you perceive the peace process, the current peace process, as a neighboring country and as a regional leader as well.
The peace process?
With the
In
FARC
Colombia.
in Colombia.
Well, I'm not going to get into the internal discussion between President Santos and President Uribe. That wouldn't be too. But I think that Colombia has made an incredible progress in terms of fighting narco-terrorism. And I ask you, a partner, to partner my country because the Fujimori regime did arms contraband from Belarusia to Jordan to Colombia to provide weapons to the guerrilla movement. I think that we need to be careful, though, of not getting the poor people to get caught in the middle of the two forces. The narco-traffickers who play together with the terrorism, and the poor people who get caught between the armed forces and the terrorism. We have lived 25 years of terrorism with a shining path in Peru. And I created the Commission of Peace and Forgiveness. But we cannot put under the rug what we went through. Just as much nobody can ignore what happened in the Second World War in the world. I'm amazed that there's still some people who says that that never happened.
The Holocaust.
The Holocaust. But I congratulate on the fact that it's making progress. And not only that, the Pacific Alliance between Chile, Peru, and Colombia, and there are now 62 countries who are online aspiring to be members of that Pacific Alliance, tells something about that relationship. We have access to the Pacific. We are geographically in a very well-located place. We can have access to the markets, to the United States, to Europe, and to Asia. Together, we can do a lot. Divided, Machiavellic will prevail.
Okay, you're next, and then I'm going to come to you, okay?
Hi, thank you for your book. I'm an electronic engineer, Peruvian, living here since 1981, and I'm going back and forth. My question is, there's a lot of problems to achieve the sustained growth. Let's imagine you have a magic wand that you can choose only one of the problems. Which one would that be?
Would you repeat the question?
If you could choose only one of the programs to...
Problems.
Problems.
There's a lot of problems to achieve the goal that you are cautiously optimistic, right? So if you were to have a magic wand and fix only one of the problems, which one would that be?
This one that is intrinsically related with two components: eliminating malnutrition, providing quality of healthcare, and quality of education, beginning with the poorest of the poorest of the poorest in the continent.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Eduardo Maciu. I'm a business student here from Venezuela as well. So I'm going to go to Cuba, and I want your impression on the new relationship between the US and Cuba, and how is that going to play in the region, and include a question in terms of the future of Latin America, with China coming in and playing an important role in the region. What does that mean for Peru and other countries economically and politically, considering kind of the political system that's in China that has very different values than the Western culture?
Well, China is going like nobody's business and investing and buying from Latin America. Not only in Latin America, they're doing also in Africa. And they are not the most sophisticated entrepreneurs of the world. I have news for you. They are buying now land in Peru, in Colombia, and in Brazil. Land for agriculture. And that's big money. Thank God the probabilities for Venezuela to be the place of developing a nuclear weapon is considerably reduced. There's a paper at the Brookings Institution with a very hard data of the relationship between Venezuela and Iran about the development of nuclear weapon. With uranium from Bolivia. I think that we should not be afraid to play ball in a big field. And that's consistent with my proposition that Latin America has the unique opportunity to be the promising continent in the world in the next 35 years. We need to diversify the sources of investment. We need to diversify the composition of our trade, foreign trade. But we also need to establish clear rules of the game. I said investment, yes, but you need to comply with the social, environmental responsibility in the sectors from where we get the greatest foreign exchange that we need. And it would be naive today to stop investment in that, because we need the money to invest in the minds of our people. The question that the friend have asked. Because we are not in a position to redistribute poverty. But at the same time, I need to be emphatic about saying that we need to distribute better the composition of growth, and growth is only a mean, not an end. We are living in a multipolar world, so we will not be excluded. What I'm saying is, why don't we get together this promising continent of Latin America together with Canada, the United States, and confront not only the challenge of narco-trafficking and organized crime, and building strong democratic institutions that are accountable, but also we can share the technology that you have, and we can provide some of our own resources. We can provide the food. You know, I make ceviche over here in Peru and in Stanford with a Peruvian lemon now, thanks to the free trade agreement.
You're making me very hungry. Okay, you're next, and then I'll come to you in the corner there.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk today, Mr. President. I lived and worked in Huaycan, which is a pueblo jovenes in Lima, and I was wondering what do you see that would be successful strategies in addressing those issues?
You know, Latin America is undergoing a dramatic changes that began 40 years ago with the migration from the rural areas to the urban area. And it was accelerated, the migration, by the terrorism shining path. And so there's a new entrepreneurship, micro-entrepreneurship that is emerging in Huaycan, in San Juan del Urigancho, in the north of Lima and the south of Lima. And new entrepreneurs. Maybe they don't pay their taxes, but you know what? They contribute to the health of the economy. If they wouldn't exist, the social unrest will be very high, and that will produce a scare for potential investors. It is true that we need to increase the level of fiscal income in order for the state to have the money to invest in education. But that presupposes the answer to the question that Larry made at the beginning, the need for strong democratic institutions that are accountable. I'm responsible for the state decision, the state reform of decentralization. If we wouldn't have done that, Shining Path would have been in power today. We made a mistake? Yes. And I say we. I consulted, I wanted to postpone 2 years this state reform because I thought that we need to train a stock of human capital that are prepared to administrate the states, the regions, the province. And the other mistake was that we didn't provide the enough mechanisms of control in order to prevent corruption. Now, there is another issue. I mentioned it, but I wanted to, the state capacity to deliver. It is not enough to have a good idea. It's not enough to think about the poor or trying to reduce the levels of inequality. We need to have the human capital that has the capacity to manage those policies at the regional, local, provincial, and district and rural community level.
Another question.
I do want to note, he's not just saying this now, he's got 2 chapters on the quality of democracy in this book and another on the state capacity to deliver. Okay, you've been waiting very patiently in the very corner there. Go ahead.
Thank you. First, I wanted to thank you for fixing the economy in Peru. I think you were a major factor there, obviously. So before I give you my question, I want to give you a little bit of background. So I'm a Peruvian.
We've only got a little bit of time left.
Sure. I'm a Peruvian. I lived through the years of the Shining Path. I had to, figure out when is it that we were going to have electricity. I lived through the whole thing of having things blowing up when we were going out with our friends. And so I think I'm representative of a section of the population that basically had to flee out of the country. My dad was a politician too in one of the cities in Lima. He was a mayor. And so a lot of us left and created companies in Silicon Valley, and we basically sold, and there's a lot of us here, right? And what happens every time that we go back and try to do business in Peru, you're saying, bring entrepreneurship, share technologies. Like for a lot of us, it's a lot easier to sell software, like go to the CIA headquarters and sell software to the DoD or to any government organization here in the US than it is to do business in Peru. And most of the time, it's not because of the technical capabilities of our software, but mostly because of the typical problem that we've had throughout the entire time, which is corruption. What do you think it's required to change in our government so that we can get rid of just basically an epidemic of corruption throughout the decision-making positions there?
Well, I repeat, at the macro level in the country and in the region, by the way, that weakness of the democratic institutions is not a monopoly of Peru. So yes, we need to strengthen the architecture of democratic institutions that is accountable. But in order to corrupt a public functionary, you need a corruptor. And which is a bad picture. If someone who have a knowledge, who have experience, who have technology, confronts with the fact that in order to contribute with your country or sell a good product, you have to pay them, don't do that. It takes two to tango. But I will end my answer to your question by saying, please don't be discouraged. You can be very successful over here with software and technology, but don't forget that Peru is still waiting for you.
Great. So we'll take your question, and then I have one last question, and I'm afraid we're going to have to close.
Thank you very much for your talk, Dr. Toledo. I have a question. I'm very passionate about rural health and rural education. I've spent a lot of time in dangerous field locations, and the observation that I have is that rural teachers and rural children are not protected. Narco-terrorism, sometimes organized crime, and even agribusiness put efforts to undermine teachers, to make them leave. And so my question to you is, how would you protect rural education? It's not just an issue for Latin America, it's an issue in Africa with robbing 200 girls. And so one idea is, would you send in protection at the same time? Would you send in the military? Would you send in the police where people are very suspicious of these institutions? My question is, how would you protect rural educators so that way we could get the poorest of the poor educated? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, as you probably have noticed, my bias is very, very clear. I doubled the salary of teachers, which is not enough. We didn't have the money because I received the economy in recession, minus 3%, and I left it at 7.5%. But we didn't have the initial money. We need to invest in training teachers in order for us to demand from them quality of education. Number two, we need to protect the child and protect the teachers in the rural areas. The temptation of a low salary for the teachers is to get involved in narco trafficking. or have to have 2 or 3 jobs to supplement their income. The kids, if they don't receive a good quality of education, they are potential members of delinquency, and we lose them. I share your passion. I want to invest 6% of the GDP, 6% not of the budget, of the GDP, into a quality of healthcare and education. I want to dedicate 60% of the income that derived from royalties and canon from raw material into eliminating malnutrition, providing quality of healthcare and quality of education. Pay them well to the teachers, train them well, and the rates of return are very high, although the return by definition is medium and long term. But there's no way around. So that's the bias. Somebody asked, what would you choose? I will choose that. What would you do concretely? I will dedicate 60% of the royalties and canon that's derived from the export of raw material to training better the teachers within the country and outside the country. And once you have a good trained teachers, you demand quality of education. And you can have the income to protect the child. So education to me is crucial. Medical doctor says, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, that the intellectual capacity of a person is defined in the first 5 years of life, even beginning when they are in the tummy of the mother. But if you reach 5 years old, and by the way, I'm a result of early malnutrition, that's why I'm short. But I compensated with a lot of fish in Chimbote. So if you don't revert those high rates of early malnutrition, you can put a lot of money in education, but that child will begin a path in a tremendous disadvantage in their life. Well, maybe that's why police are needed. And that's a good investment instead of doing something else. Instead of trying to kill the peasants who are claiming the rights of their natural resources, maybe they should be taking care of the teachers and the kids that go to the school in the rural areas.
So the last question I want to ask you is about the role for the United States in producing shared and inclusive growth in Latin America and in the Americas generally, I would say. It's very clear you've put down some very, I'd say, pointed markers. Number one, that we should pay attention. You know, there's been a lot about the pivot to Asia, the pivot back to Europe and the Middle East now. At least we should pay attention to Latin America and give it its due share. I think you and others have been very forceful in saying it's got to be with a new attitude, that it's a peer relationship and not a domineering relationship. But, you know, some of us feel that, okay, then when we try and lead from behind, which has been the famous mantra of the Obama administration, we don't get from sitting Latin American presidents. We get it from former Latin American presidents, the forceful leadership for democracy and the condemnation, for example, of a Venezuelan regime that is locking up the opposition leader, you know, engaging in murderous violence against its youth, and so on and so forth. And then we go and put sanctions on some of the people responsible for these regime abuses, and it's the big bad United States again beating up on Latin America in a, you know, in an arrogant fashion. So what would you recommend as the role and posture for the United States going forward in this vision you have, not only obviously for your country, but for the Americas in general?
First of all, the United States cannot be the police of the world. With respect to Latin America, we have an enormous space for complementarities and a common challenges. The acting presidents today in Latin America, I don't want to get into Africa. I'm going to concentrate more on Latin America. The acting presidents of Latin America today who play a game of closing their eyes to what is happening in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, in Ecuador, in Bolivia, or in Argentina, their silence is a good sign of complicity. If we don't do our job within our own region, in terms of strengthening democracy and be active on it, we are part of the complicity. The Organization of American States is based in the United States, Larry, you know. And we have signed the Inter-American Democratic Charter.
In your country?
In my country, during my government. September 11, 2001. Secretary Colin Powell was there. He couldn't leave Peru because something happened over here. The OAS was responsible to implement is the Charter of Democracy to monitor the quality of democracy in the region. And yet, nothing happened. The United States is a major contributor to the OAS, but you could have a better, a much louder voice and not allowing the creation of other institutions that are manipulated by the oil money. I don't want to be part of that complicity. And that's why I raised my voice. And I want you to know, I want Venezuela and Latin America knows that I'm a militant for the values of democracy and respect of human rights, freedom of the press. Just because I have a different point of view from you, I'm not ready to accept that I'm subject to be in jail. Because I should have been in jail a lot of times for having said a lot of things in the world. But let me tell you, I'm a member of the team of vice presidents, including Felipe Gonzalez and Fernando Enrique Cardoso, who was leading a new team on the defense of the democratic values of Venezuela. My friends, Larry, it has been a very rich, and it's a good thing that I didn't go through all these slides because you would have been disappointed because we'll indulge in a lot of figures and saying, look at the numbers that I produce, look at the numbers that we have as Latin America. I wanted to have the chance to do this question and answers. And again, I want to repeat what I said at the beginning. I'm undoubted to see the DRL, to the School of Education, to the Latin American Studies Center, to the Freedom and Spokane Institute, to Stanford University, who has shaped my life in more than one way. I don't know what the destiny will take me from here on. But I promise you that you will see me be an actor in this fight for a democracy that delivers. Thank you very much.